Hello, hello. I'm Casey,
And I'm Fallon.
and this is Render the Darkness podcast, and we are here yet again with our esteemed guest, Mr. Maxim Furek, who is the author of this book right here, what we're going to be talking
Oh,
about.
look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't have your copy, you need to get one. I highly recommend it, and you will want to run out and get one when we're done with this interview, I'm sure of it.
Yes.
So thanks again for coming back on the podcast and talking about this book with us. You've written several books at this point, and each one is just better than the last.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Casey, and thank you, Fallon. Yeah, I appreciate being back on your show. We always seem to have a good time, and we always go take a deep dive into the paranormal. And I just, appreciate, the fact that we got together and that we're having these conversations. So thank you. And I like to think that maybe collectively we help advance, the cause of the paranormal. Helping to define it and helping to maybe get more respect from the scientific community. So I think it's important that we continue to do what we're doing. And I'm just, grateful to be a guest on your podcast. And, actually, it's a lot of fun. So, that's why I'm here.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yes, very, very much.
Well, I'm going to just jump right in and kick us off with some questions, if that's okay.
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right.
Don't make them too hard. Don't make them too hard.
I'll try not. So one of my favorite things in this book was your references to and from H.P. Lovecraft. You mentioned him quite a bit. So can you tell us a little bit about why you kind of think he is the only one who really adequately explained the mechanism of fear and how that associates to the book itself?
Right. There are a lot of things that came together for me to have the idea of writing this book. And Paranormal Apocalypse looks at the end times. And a lot of us are very fearful of what's around the corner. We don't know. I mean, it's all that uncertainty. H.P. Love, and one reason that I wrote it, I'm a horror movie buff. I'll go to the movies by myself. My wife refuses to go. Sometimes I'm the only one there at the theater, but I love horror. I love to get scared, although a lot of times, you don't get scared because, you've seen it so many times. But I was watching the trailers, and all of the horror and sci-fi trailers seemed to be apocalyptic. I mean, it seemed like there was something in the air that everybody's just concerned about what's the end times, dystopian societies and universes and all. So there's something in the air. I think our climate, not just in the United States, but in the world, like we're pretty much divided. There's very few voices of moderation. So there's a lot of fear and apprehension that go along with that. So right now, the climate is kind of, I think, is gloomy. I wrote the book to just try to go and figure it out for myself. I think a lot of people are afraid and uncertain. And I used H.P. Lovecraft, and I love Lovecraft because, first, a lot of people don't know about him. They know about Edgar Allan Poe, but they don't know about H.P. Lovecraft, who was maybe even more influential at this point. But Lovecraft had a saying, and I used that in the beginning of the book, and he said that fear is the most elemental of human emotions, but fear of the unknown is the most powerful of man's emotions. And I started with that. I don't think there's been any clinicians, any psychologists or psychiatrists or scientists that have been able to go and explain fear as well as Lovecraft did. It's fear of the unknown that is the most powerful. And in my book, The Paranormal Apocalypse, there's a group of people called the eschatologists. They study the end times, or eschatology, and they believe that either the apocalypse has already happened, back in the old days, or that it's happening now, or that it's happening right around the corner. It's going to happen. So I think there's a lot of fear and anxiety about that for some people, and I think that people, when they're afraid, they'll do foolish things. They'll forget about themselves, and they'll follow leaders, especially cult leaders. And I talk about that in the book. So I think that fear is a tremendous motivator and and that's the basic premise of my book, that we're afraid, and Paranormal Apocalypse talks about that fear.
Absolutely. I really, really, when I was reading that book, really had the opportunity to, look into a multitude of perspectives of fear. An individual typically only has their own personal perspective. So when reading this book, it was really eye-opening to be able to see a perspective on so many different other levels of fear and things that I may not have ever even thought would be something to be afraid of or to fear at all.
Or as they say, be afraid, be very afraid. I mean, there's a lot of things out there, that a lot of uncertainty, so well, anyway, but we'll talk about that. But I think that was the basic premise, and I'm glad that you guys picked up on it, because that was my intent. And you need to, as an author, I need to write for the audience and not get too abstract, which I tend to do, but just keep it in the pocket, keep it in the groove, so that everybody gets it.
I definitely think you did that with this book, for sure.
Okay.
I enjoyed the journey that the book kind of took you on. And again, I enjoyed the different mindsets and thinking patterns that it put me into as the reader. I appreciated that.
Okay.
Val, what'd you think?
Oh, I completely agree. Yeah, it was really good. I liked all the twists and turns. I mean, like you said, about the different things about fear from different perspectives. Like each chapter kind of dives into, different ones, and it's just like, like she said, like you wouldn't think about it until you read it, and you're just like, yeah, that's scary, because you don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future.
Right. Yeah.
So,
and even with the doomsday clock, we have these scientists that, I think it was after the atomic bomb in 1945, I believe, they got together, like Oppenheimer and these scientists, and they had a doomsday clock just to gauge how close we were to midnight, when everything's going to go kapow. And I think the latest is, I want to say it was 28 seconds or 19 seconds to midnight, getting closer only because of the uncertainty with China, Russia, North Korea, these variables that we can't control and we may not understand. So again, we may think of a nuclear war as something that's, way down the line and it may not happen, but, it's as close as two people pushing two buttons. So, it's just something to keep reminding ourselves of. Not to be afraid of, but realizing that is one possibility, especially with so many countries. And I list them in Paranormal Apocalypse, but so many of these countries like Pakistan and India, that have the bomb. Israel, we believe Taiwan has it, and North Korea, so it's kind of frightening.
Yeah,
absolutely. On that note, I know that, in the book you use the term apocalyptic awe in the book. And I know that you mentioned in like the 1950s for the nuclear testing outside of Las Vegas, I know you use that kind of like as an example of apocalyptic awe. What is apocalyptic awe, and what can you explain as far as the nuclear testing and how that's an example of it?
Yeah, that's a great example, and that's crazy. It's really crazy. Apocalyptic awe is the term that I conjure. I put that together, and it's our way of controlling our fear of the unknown. So our fear of the apocalypse. And what we do that through literature. We do that through motion pictures and song and everything else. We do it through culture. They did it in Vegas back in the 50s. And I want your listeners to Google this and find out how many thousands of underground testing they did in Nevada. That's right outside of Las Vegas. And then how many thousands of above ground testings that they did. People, gamblers in Las Vegas could go and see those mushroom clouds. And they thought that was sort of interesting, and the Chamber of Commerce started to find out when the government was going to detonate those bombs. And they would go, and the tourists would come in there with their lawn chairs and their beer and their sunscreen and watch these bombs. The weirdest thing was they had Miss Atomic Bomb. They took the lead singer from the Tropicana, and they gave her this cute little bathing suit that was shaped like a mushroom cloud, and she represented this this nuclear this fascination with nuclear bombs, what I call apocalyptic awe. And it wasn't until later that people started to get the leukemia and the effects of radiation poisoning, that was happening here in the United States. But talk about being very, just totally naive and actually stupid. I mean, we were just ignorant as to how powerful radiation was, but they did that. They did that, and they turned that into another way of making money. So that horrible thing about exploding those bombs. And even remember at one time, they had American Army soldiers take off their glasses and look directly into that bomb, just to see what would happen. So we did a lot of things that were just very barbaric and not very well thought out. And I talk about those in Apocalyptic Paranormal Apocalypse. It's horrible, some of the things that we've done and the ways we've mistreated, our fellow humans. So, and I'm talking about the governments and the military who's doing the people with power. It's totally unacceptable. So
I think they still do things like that now, or try to still do things like that now. Luckily, especially with all the technology that we've had in advancements since then, a lot of people are more privy to things like radiation poisoning and the side effects of breathing in that kind of stuff. But they certainly do still host experiments, and they certainly do still try to get people involved.
Right. Yeah. And one thing that may or may not piggyback on this are the cattle mutilations. And out in Montana and Colorado in the West, states close to Nevada, there were a lot of cattle mutilations. And the theories are numerous. One is that it was flying saucers, taking specimens. Another one that it was cults doing that. And the third one, the one that I like, is that it was the government testing these carcasses to see how much radiation they were carrying. And I think that was the one that rings my bell. So I think that those nuclear tests, that radiation has to go someplace. And, with humans, I'm sure that it goes into our liver and kidneys and all that, our internal organs, but same thing with animals. So I think that is not a new theory. I mean, that theory's been around for a long time. So, I haven't heard lately about animal mutilations, but, we've had them all over the place. And, so I don't know. I mean, have you had that in around Arkansas? Are you familiar with cattle mutilations?
Not specifically in Arkansas. I've seen, not recently, but I have seen articles about it in other places like Nevada and other, countries, even other countries, but not specifically Arkansas.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
We have, when we have things that are kind of like, I don't want to say natural phenomenons, because that's certainly not a natural phenomenon. But we have things like, we have a bunch of birds that will just mysteriously fall out of the sky and die with no explanation why. That just
or
happened.
Fish just come up and just die on the surface, and
just tons of fish, or like swine will just keel over.
Yeah.
With no explanation on why. And it's like, you have to think, are they dropping something with their, chemtrails, or is there something that's making these animals sick? Is there something that's causing this to happen? Like, this isn't something that just naturally should be happening like it does sometimes.
Yeah. Charles Fort he was a rich guy that went around and he would compile all these things. He would go through newspapers and everything and make lists of like chunks of meat falling out of the sky, or ice coming down in the Sahara. And they called it Forteana, his study of those anomalies. And we still have that today. Episodes of spontaneous combustion, things that make no sense, no scientific sense, but plenty of people see them. So, cryptids, thunderbirds, all that. So I don't know what it is or how to explain it, but it's something that lot of people have seen a lot of times. So
I know one thing that you focus a lot on in this book, and it dives into, is the Book of Revelation.
yeah.
I know you also, with that, you talk about the four horsemen of the apocalypse. What was their message to you? What do you interpret their message to be?
Well, what I did was my messages, like from reading and researching, all these other people, I put an idea together. So, I mean, you don't really want to ask me what my conclusion is, because I mean, I don't have a starting point, but from everybody, from things that I've read, it seems that the white horse is either Christ coming back, the second coming, or it's the Antichrist. And I've heard two versions. The red horse is war. There's the green horse of famine, and there's the black horse of death. So with the four horsemen of the apocalypse, they represent the seven seals, but those are the first four. And supposedly before the second coming, you'll have those four horsemen in that order. And then you'll have the martyrs singing. You'll have the, I think it's 3 years of suffering, man-made suffering, 3 years of God-made suffering, and then the martyrs, and then the silence. So the seven seals, is pretty well defined of what that is. But, we don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know if those horses, do actually represent famine and death and war, or something else. But the Christians believe that with the second coming, Christ will come. The good people will go into the rapture and go to heaven, to the heavenly reward. The bad people go into the pit, where they will wait, I believe, for a second chance at redemption. And there's even something there, I think. Now, I don't know if this is. I think these are the eschatologists talk about that Jews, will also. There's a certain percentage of Jews that will be saved too, and will go into heaven. So again, it gets a little bit murky. Well, it gets real murky because we just don't know. But that's But I find it fascinating. And and certainly it's descriptive, and yeah, I talked about that in Paranormal Apocalypse, and I don't know. I mean, is that your belief too? That
To be honest, I'm going to be very honest about my religious viewpoint. I personally, I would classify myself as more of an agnostic. I don't believe one way or the other because I don't know.
Okay.
So it could be true. It could not be true. Again, I'm just kind of neutral on it.
Yeah.
I don't lean towards no, and I don't lean towards yes. I'm just kind of middle grounded. To me, I do think that when it comes specifically to the Book of Revelations and the idea of things like the end of times and the four horsemen, I think it can balance both ways. I think it can contribute to fear.
Absolutely.
But I also think it can be utilized as a guideline for people who do believe in the possibility of that being what happens at the end of it. So I think there's balance in that book.
Yeah. Casey, you're absolutely right. It's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's fear and paranoia for what may come if you're not a good Christian and you don't atone, but also it's a type of positivity and positive thinking that if you have faith and you believe in an afterlife and a reward, then you can ride out fear of death, the fear of the end times a lot better. So it becomes a therapy too. So it's fear as well as therapy, but it's up to the individual to choose which coin they're going to toss. So that's pretty much the way it is. But talking about being an agnostic, what's interesting, we had a conversation today down at a paranormal group, and I was saying that I believe our Western culture, and this is not to bash the US of A or to bash Christianity, but I believe that we got it wrong. I think that in Christianity and in our culture, we look at things in terms of stark black or white. We look at terms of good or evil rather than shades of gray. We tend to look at things linear from point A to point B when really they're circular. They're never ending, that mandala. And I think a lot of the Eastern religions, like Buddhism in particular, seem to view it in a way that makes more sense to me. Like it doesn't make any sense to just look at things in terms of black and white, because the truth is in the gray, the shades of gray. And a lot of us don't get this. And again, even in our present day society, with all of the angst, the argumentation, the division, I think if there were more people in the shades of gray, more voices of moderation, I think our country would be in a better place. So again, it's not just a theoretical, but it's a pragmatic philosophy to be moderate and to dabble in those shades of gray rather than the extremes. So anyway, I think that's part of the conversation. And it's not just paranormal; it's philosophical. Which it needs to be. Again, my theory is everything is everything. Everything combines. Everything's that big ball of wax. Spiritual, paranormal, scientific. So.
I agree with that 100%. That's kind of where my mindset as far as the world goes. I do think that everything happens for a reason. I think things are too well designed and fall into place, too aligned, for there to not be some kind of a grand scheme of things. To me, that's my personal perspective on it. So, with that perspective, a book like Paranormal Apocalypse is really interesting to me because it allows that opportunity to be able to expand my thinking on that, because I get to see other parts of the world's thinking, and I get to see other cultural thinking, and I get to see references to things that people have talked about 30 years ago, 50 years ago, and get into their mindset as well, because everything is constantly changing and shifting.
Right. Yeah. And what's interesting too, when I'm researching my book, The Scream of the Haunted House, and in Chinese religious and philosophical culture, with their yin yang, they believe that we have two souls, and when we die, the one soul stays with us, earthbound, until it dissipates, and the other one, with a higher vibration, goes into the great beyond, goes into the higher place. So, two souls. Pretty interesting way of looking at that. Again, all religions and cultures believe in an afterlife, even though I think some of them don't admit to that. But everybody believes that there's something after we die, or wishes or hopes that there is. And I think that's the big universal unknown. What happens when we die? What happens after death? And nobody knows, but I think we all would like to know. And and being agnostic, maybe helps you ride that out, because you don't need religion to have faith. You don't need religion to go and be able to be spiritual and be cognitive and think things out. So who knows?
Dawn, you want to weigh in a little bit? What we were talking about?
Oh yeah, the religion aspect of it. I honestly believe wholeheartedly that there's definitely something. There's a higher power. I definitely believe that there is an afterlife. I think, honestly, I do believe in the revelations. That it's like whenever you die, I think that you will be able to go up there and you will be able to see everyone that has died before you, and you're going to have like a really pain-free life. You're still going to be living, but you're going to have no pain, no nothing. You're just going to be able to a great life.
Yeah. I have no concept of what that might be, other than, that I might see my mother and my father and my grandparents. I mean, I could think about that, but I just can't envision that. I just, and I've been raised with that idea, that thought my whole life. So, but I just can't picture what that would be like. So I don't know why that is. I mean, I wish I could, but I can't. So
I'm the same. I also can't picture or envision that.
You can't envision that?
I can't envision that being something that actually happens.
yeah.
That's just me personally,
Well, hey, everybody has their own opinion. Like I said, I've just always thought that.
That is the beauty of religion. It's such a personal thing.
Right.
Typically I don't talk about it in general, let alone like publicly talk about it,
Yeah.
because it's such a personal thing. I'm not going to change your mind. You're not going to change my mind. We feel how we feel.
And that's the point. I mean, I like to talk about religion, like what I call it God talk. I like to do the God talk, but my only rule is this, I'm not going to try. I don't want to try to convert you to my side, or not that my side. I don't have a side, and I don't want you to try to convert me. I mean, there's some people that think that if they could get you to sign on the dotted line, that maybe they score points, somehow. But, I believe that my personal belief with my higher power, my God, my Allah, is personal. It's spiritual. It's sacrosanct. It's just it's my thing. Nobody else's. So, and that's a wonderful thing. And listen, I used to work. I was a drug and alcohol professional, and I would co-facilitate Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Those folks were, it would be recommended that they go and find a higher power. And it could be Jesus Christ, Lord and Savior, or anybody, but they wanted somebody outside of, the alcoholic or the drug addict, a higher power. And they said that, you could choose whatever you want, but a lot of these addicts were so into themselves. They were so, egocentric and so selfish that they could not see beyond that. So by having a higher power, it helped them to look at things through another lens, maybe being more compassionate for their brothers and sisters and all that. So, the term higher power is a good thing. And we get to pick and choose. But I agree with everything that's been said tonight, that I think that there's some sort of intelligence. I mean, there has to be, when you take a look at our DNA, how we're born, how we live, how we think. And we are, and I talk about this in Paranormal Apocalypse, in the Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price, and which is one of my favorite movies and one of my favorite chapters. But in the end, he tells the zombies that, he goes, "You're just freaks," but he's proud to be a human. And the thing we need to underscore is that humans are above animals, and that's because we have more DNA, and more is better. We have more DNA to be spiritual, if you believe that we're made in the image and likeness of God, and also more DNA to have that cognition to think. And certainly animals have language, and they use tools, and they have tribes and everything else, and they do art. But we own this planet. We have rocket ships to the moon and everything else. I mean, the animals can't touch us. And even though, whales and dolphins and, monkeys and chimps and everything are, and even, I think I talk about this in the book too, that 98% of our DNA matches chimps and I think gorillas and bonobos. 98%. There's only 2% of us that makes us unique. And that's that we have more DNA and we got more cognition and spirituality. Nobody else does. So that's pretty amazing. I do these conferences, and every now and then somebody will raise their hand on, what about these animals that can use tools? Well, good for them. Yes, they can, but they can't do what we do. So, just remember that. I don't know if you remember that chapter in The Last Man on Earth with the movie with Vincent Price.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And that's where I sort of wove popular culture into the book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So with that chapter, it kind of, after reading it, it kind of made me wonder, as on your perspective, Do you think that mankind being so significantly different, even if it is just by that little 2%, do you think that can also potentially be our downfall?
Oh yeah. With animals, it's stimulus response. Something happens, they respond to it. With us, with humans, it's stimulus cognition response. Before we respond, we think. Some of us, not all of us. So,
That's the design.
yeah, that's the design. Yeah, yeah. So not all of us follow that rule, but absolutely. Look at we talk about aliens possibly being on Earth watching us. We talk about Bigfoot, cryptids being on Earth watching us, wondering what we're all about. Well, what we're all about is we're pretty destructive. When you take a look at what we did with the buffalo and what we did with the Native Americans and on and on and on. Man is a destroyer. And look at what we're doing to this planet. And that's horrible. And I talk about that in the book. But remember the Dust Bowl from the 1930s, when all of those people from the Midwest, like the Okies, had to go to California because there were dust storms. They just planted and replanted their fields, and there was nothing to hold it together. And when they had the winds, it was just ripped away. It was horrendous. They couldn't see. It was apocalyptic. It was dust storms of biblical proportions, and that was only in the 1930s. That was just yesterday, in terms of time. And that was because we didn't manage the land. So those Okies went to California just to live and survive. And it's funny because John Steinbeck wrote Grapes of Wrath, and he talked about the Okies that went from Oklahoma to California. And Grapes of Wrath was criticized for being a socialistic document here in America. And it was criticized as being anti-communist over in Russia, the Soviet Union. So, John Steinbeck couldn't win. All he said was that it was people working together for survival. That's what Grapes of Wrath was. It wasn't about socialism. It wasn't about any political tool other than to survive. And so.
I think part of the. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and the most controversial thing was, I don't think we're going to get bleep, but I think the one guy was starving and the one woman was lactating, and he was suckling on the breast just to get to stay alive. So that got a lot of play, and a lot of people had things to say about that. Like being whatever, pornographic, dirty, whatever. God, it's yeah. Come on, it's read the book and then go decide. But Grapes of Wrath, one of the best books ever written, and still being banned in some libraries in the US of A. So go figure that.
I think one of the main reasons why that book was so controversial, and this is just my personal opinion on the book, I think the reason there was so much controversy behind it is because really when you got down to the bottom of the sand, the idea and point of that book was that if people band together, you can rise above and you can accomplish.
Yeah.
And that's not a message that anybody wants spread out into the world, because there's more people than anything. If we really band together, that's a scary and terrifying thought on what we could accomplish. And
but
I think that's what made that book so controversial.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Message was terrifying.
Yeah. And you want to keep people in line. You keep them scared, keep them off balance, keep them in chaos. Every day throw a little bit of chaos at them. And I'll tell you this too. Let's just say that the three of us like our lives to be orderly and tranquil and relaxing and everything else. Okay, good stuff. Okay, but I think there's some people that thrive in chaos, and because maybe their lives are out of control or out of balance, that they're thinking, well, maybe yours should be too, and maybe they enjoy the fact that these are chaotic times intentionally. They want to keep us, off balance. And again, the entities, the powers that are, want us to be off balance. So we're not getting together and mobilizing. So we are divided and we argue amongst each other. That's exactly where they want us, conservative, liberal, independent, whatever. That's what's happening now. And I talk about this in my book. And again, everything is everything. My book has a lot of politics and it has a lot of religion as well as paranormal. It's because that's just the way it is. That's the way the world it revolves. So, I don't think everybody is going to understand that book. I mean, I'm thinking that maybe a lot of people will, but maybe there'll be a bunch of people that won't, or maybe they just don't even want to hear the message. I don't know.
I think that if, a reader can pick up on that book, and for me, I picked up on it pretty quickly. I think that the idea in that book is when you have to combine those three things. They are intersynced universally. They just are. And so in order to get the message across that you try to get across in this book, you have to be open to communicating about all of those things, because otherwise you can't understand.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think that, people can be bullheaded about their beliefs, and it's hard to open their thinking about it. Mm-hmm. But when you take those things and combine them in the way that you did, I think that that is the formula to opening up that path of thinking. Mm-hmm. If somebody will just commit and allow that to happen. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, I think you cracked the formula on that.
Oh, thank you so much. I
will have to agree wholeheartedly with you. I feel kind of bad because I'm going to step back here. I don't know what book y'all were talking about. I've never read it.
Oh, Grapes of Wrath.
Yeah, I've never read it. So that's why I didn't, that's why I was like, I've never read it.
No, it's a classic and it's great. It's John Steinbeck, and he did Cannery Row and the Little Painted Pony or whatever. But Steinbeck is an American great, and but he suffered from depression. He would throw away his manuscripts. But Grapes of Wrath is an American classic, and if you get a chance, Fallon, read it. I think you'll enjoy it. But
definitely
again,
have to do that.
Yeah, and actually, I should dig it up. I should reread it.
I should too. I had to read it for a school report in 9th grade. So in the 2 semesters, the first semester I had to read that book, and then in the second one I had to read Lord of the Flies. And
wow! Okay, yeah.
So like 2 very similar premise, but like very conflicting.
Yeah,
messages.
was that Piggy? Was that the kid that they stoned? Was his name Piggy? Yeah, okay, yeah. And I think, and what was the Lord of the Flies? I think it was. I mean, they got together and they turned like into animals.
They did. They found a way to survive amongst each other, sort of, but also, it was kind of a healthy combination. Well, not healthy. There's nothing healthy about that book, but it was an equal combination of the idea of survival, but also how that tears you apart when you're constantly faced with situation after situation that you don't understand and you don't know how to overcome.
Right.
So, to me, it was kind of, I think that's why the teacher assigned those 2 specific books, because they were similar in premise, but they were also conflicting in message.
Yeah. And how did that go over when you read Grapes of Wrath about the lactating mom and all that? I mean, was that had to be shocking at your young tender age, right? I mean, I'm sure that's something that they all talked about.
That was also around the same time where they were really hitting hard on home economics and health. And that was around the same age group where we were kind of learning about all of that kind of stuff. Okay. So I think for me, when I read that part, to me, I just thought it was a natural thing. Like that was what a woman lactates for, not necessarily a grown man, but to help survive, like for natural surviving. And in an emergency situation like that, if that is what you had, that is what you had.
Yeah. And maybe as a male, maybe we looked at that more through a sexual lens, and our which is inappropriate. But I think maybe that's probably where some of that controversy comes from. Right. In Stephen King's Carrie, there's a similar situation there's a scene where Carrie has her menstrual cycle.
Oh yeah, that's a terrible scene.
Yeah, and the girls are throwing the tampons there and saying, "Plug it up, plug it up, plug it up." Now, later there were critics that were said that a female writer would never have written that. It could only have been a male that was be so disrespectful or insensitive. And I was just wondering about that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that sexuality, male or femaleness comes into that thing. I mean, it's just, girls, bad girls bullying, being bad and bullying another girl who's different.
Yeah.
I think that's what that was about.
I think with Stephen King's writing specifically, and I know you could chime in here because he's your favorite author, but your second favorite author, Maxim. I think with his writing specifically, even though there is a lot of fantasy entangled into it, I do think he applies a lot of life into it, like things he's experienced and things that have happened just based on the interviews that I've seen him have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So who's to say that wasn't based on something that he heard or read or dreamed or something that happened in his hometown? Or so who's to say that was, something that he just created in his mind as a man to be as gruesome in that scene as he could be? It may be something based on something that he actually heard had happened or saw that had happened or whatever,
Yeah, he rode that train of adolescent women having the power, psychokinetic energies, and that being able to, like Carrie, like Firestarter, all those, and and that's the theory. The theory is that adolescent, women have this power that they can't control. And even in the Schmurl haunting, the book when Ed and Lorraine came to town, one of my latest books, the Schmurl daughter Dawn witnessed the collie Simon being levitated and thrown against the room. And one theory is that it wasn't demonic energies, but it was Dawn herself that had these psychokinetic energies and was able to make the dog do that. So again, we don't know, but I ran into Dawn around the time that happened back in the 80s, and I didn't want to go and bother her and bug her. I really wanted to ask her about that, but I didn't touch it. I didn't interview any of the Schmurls, even though they were in my backyard, because they were being terrorized by demons and the media and by the local people. So, didn't want to do that.
Which I think a lot of people also say that women or girls, like right whenever they hit puberty, they're kind of in that like veil to where they're easily attached to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that could be another thing, of why a lot of the hauntings and stuff, or some of the hauntings and stuff involve, younger girls.
Yeah.
And even boys too, in the.
Yeah, good point. I know decades ago, I belonged to Stan Gordon's paranormal group, and I was a field investigator. Now, he never called me to do any investigating, but part of the paperwork that I had was like, when you do an investigation, if the person who saw the UFO is female, you have to find out if she was having her menstrual cycle, because evidently that would go and play into, I don't know what, maybe their sensitivity, I'm not sure what, but that was one of the questions. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
So this kind of plays into sort of, I don't know if it does or not, but it brought this to my mind. I've also read that there are some states who, if a woman commits murder and she is on her menstrual cycle, that she could plead insanity and get away with it because she's on her menstrual cycle.
Wow.
So at what level does that natural process in a female's body system no longer become the fuel for justifying what a woman does or does not do or says or does not say?
In the Amityville Horror, Butch DeFeo, the 23-year-old that killed his family, he shot his parents and his two sisters and two brothers, and he claimed that he was possessed by a demon. And they had a trial, and they found out no, he wasn't demonically possessed, but he was had a personality disorder that he needed instant gratification, and he had no empathy. You know, he's just a real horrible human being, or an excuse for a human being. But that would be interesting if, and I don't know if there ever was a trial case where the murderess claimed that she was temporarily insane because of her menstrual cycle. The closest that came to that was the woman from Houston, Texas, Andrea Yates, who drowned, I think, all 5 of her babies. She drowned them one by one. She dried them off. She drowned them, dried them off, and put them neatly in little piles before she called 911. And the verdict was that she was suffering from postpartum depression. Certainly makes the hormones, and it's just like an emotional hurricane. So, I mean, I can't imagine what that's like, that chaotic, depressing roller coaster. So that's what she did. She was not an evil mom, but she was a mom that was just totally whacked out by the hormones, and that was her state. I mean, she was just like, and she was put in prison, or her husband divorced her. But what a horrible thing. I mean, I remember that was on everybody's mind, when we saw that. She was, she had an excuse. I mean, it was still horrible, but she had an excuse. But then you look at somebody like Susan Smith, who let her kids go down into the pond there in South Carolina, and because for the love of a boy who didn't want to have any kids. I mean, that was totally evil. That was totally evil, to watch her kids go down there and scream for mommy. I mean, that just to this, that's the most horrific thing that I've ever heard. That's just, just not meant to be. So sometimes reality is more horrific than fantasy, and and horror, and the horror movies and all that. So, and those are 2 examples of that, or 3 with Amityville.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to say that brings us back to your book, but it kind of does, as far as the fear versus fantasy. It does bring us back to it.
Yeah.
There's certainly a lot of fear, real fear, out in the world. People are living it on a constant daily basis.
Yeah.
And, it's really about how you cope with that, and you deal with that, and how you believe your transition into that is going to be.
Right.
I know, there are a lot of things that could cause it, and they can affect it. Like, I know you mentioned the 2024 drone hysteria. Like, how do you think that affected the nation?
Well, you know what? To this day, I'm still looking for answers. And this drone hysteria of 2024 is just the beginning. It started around Halloween. They saw drones over New Jersey. Nobody knew what they were. Everybody had their conjecture. The governor of New York shut down some of the airports, the adjacent state. The one drone manufacturer said that terrorists took a nuclear bomb from the Ukraine and brought it to Jersey, and that the American military had drones that were looking for the heat signatures. Representative from South Carolina, who's on the UFO committee, claimed that these were extraterrestrials visiting us. So that you had a whole lot of conjecture. At the end of the day, we never had an explanation for what that was. Nobody gave it to us. So we're still sort of waiting, I guess. But if you go back to 2023, same thing happened with the Chinese balloons. They were as big as buses, We shot a couple of them down, but again, where was the closure? Where was the explanation? Where was okay, you don't have to be afraid anymore, because this is what competent government does. They keep us safe, and in both physically and psychologically. So I think we may be safe physically. We are not safe psychologically. We are just being battered. Not too long ago, it was in another thing that took place in South Carolina. No, it was in Louisiana. Sophisticated drones were going over the one Air Force base there with bombers and stealth fighters and all that. We were not able to jam them and take them down. They were advanced drones. Again, We don't know where they came from, what they were doing. Again, more uncertainty. And just to pile on top of that, the congressional UFO hearings of July 2023, of September 2024, or November of 2024, and September of 2025, we learned nothing other than David Grush and Luis Elizondo believe that the government knows something and isn't telling us. That's all we got from that. So, uncertainty, fear of the unknown, damn right. I mean, man, we all suffer it because they're not telling us anything. And those congressional UFO hearings, we were supposed to go and get the full result, full transparency, the government coming forth. They're not going to tell us. I mean,
No.
And you know why they're not going to tell us, Fallon? Because, good question, because we don't have the need to know.
Oh.
We don't have the need to know. We don't belong to those black ops groups that are more secretive than the FBI and the CIA. We don't have the need to know, and there's no politician, including the president, that has the need to know what we know about Roswell, crashed vehicles, and humanoids. I don't think we're ever going to find out. I don't think they're ever going to tell us because they don't deem us worthy of that information. So again, I'm very jaded and callous about how my government operates.
Yeah. See, I'm wondering though if this is just a theory. I don't really know, but I'm wondering if they're not saying anything because they don't want us to get freaked out and get together and form a mob and go towards the White House. Hey, you're not doing something. You need to do something. You better do it now. We're just all riling up.
Yeah. Well, you're right. They had, I think it was called the Robinson Report back in maybe the 40s or I think the 50s maybe, that said the same thing. Psychologists said that we couldn't handle it. If we knew that there was life on other planets or aliens were visiting us, we couldn't handle it. Well, I don't know about that.
I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of us would, But they're saying it would turn religion upside down and all that,
I could tell you my theory. I think they're not telling us because they have the knowledge, they have the need to know that they have placed other life forms in disguise all around us.
Oh, yeah, yep.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want us questioning anything that they may be doing on the surface right in front of us.
Uh-huh.
And if we have knowledge of any of that stuff, that opens the door for questions.
Yeah.
And they don't want open doors for questions because they're playing magic tricks. They're distracting us however they need to distract us and drawing the curtains however they need to draw the curtains so that they can put their little players out on the field.
Exactly. Good. Well, you should write a book. That's good. That's good stuff. No, I think you're right. Yeah. Again, even with the what we're seeing out there, it could be our own stuff, but I don't know. I mean, when you look at the Nimitz footage from 2004, and it looked like a Tic Tac. It zigzagged. It went under the water.
Oh, yeah.
This is from Navy pilots. They shot this. It's faster and more maneuverable than anything we have. So I don't think it was one of ours. It's that 3% that's anomalous. That it's either ours, theirs, or somebody else's. Maybe from another dimension, another planet. We don't know, but but we just don't know. And but it's faster and more maneuverable than anything we have. A human couldn't stand the G-force. With those twists and turns. So whatever that is, I haven't heard a very good explanation from anybody. And again, there's that fear of the unknown. There's that fear of uncertainty, and if you're like me and if you like to investigate and research and find answers, this is just so frustrating, not to have the answers to, some of those questions.
Yeah. Which, I will also say that I think it's crazy this is just, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I think it's crazy for anybody to sit there and think that we are the only ones in this entire universe.
Mm-hmm.
There's planets, universe is different, everywhere. We can't be the only ones. There's just to me, there's just no way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, they're coming and trying to see, possibly, like what we're about, or like why we're doing the things that we're doing, like why are we destroying our world?
Yeah. I forget what I think it was called the Drake equation. Does that ring any bells? There was some scientist that said just what Fallon said. If there's so many possibilities that there's life out there, well, where are they? That's what he was asking. He said, where are they? And I think it was called the Drake equation. And I need to research that again. So I may be wrong, but that was the question, and that was posed years ago. We've been asking this the same, for a long time. And there were heretics that were put to death because they said that there was life on other planets, because Copernicus said that Earth went around the sun. He was one of the bad guys, but because he was older, he got away with it. And then Galileo was given house arrest for saying the same thing. Bruno was burned at the stake for saying the same thing, that the Earth went around the sun. And because church and state, because back then the church said that because we were made in the image and likeness of God, then everything had to revolve around the earth. That was their plan. And they got that wrong.
Well, I am a huge conspiracy theorist.
Oh, good.
Probably not good publicly, good privately. But to me, I think that a lot of the questions that we have for the things like that we see now, I think they've already been answered. We go all the way back to the Inky, if you want to go back that far. And the just insane things that existed back then, the technology that existed back then that we still don't understand some of to this day. Who did that? Where did that come from? Man didn't do that. That wasn't already here. It wasn't an already earthly invention. That came.
Are you talking about the Incas or the pyramids?
Correct.
The pyramids,
Yes.
right? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the thing about
we could go back as far as the Inca, and there was technology even back then that was unexplainable, or things that they were able to build back then that were unexplainable, in the ways that they were able to do it, or how they even had the knowledge or the technology to know how to do it back then.
And to this day, we have not been able to figure out how the Egyptians built those pyramids.
Yeah.
There's plenty of theories. They used 100,000 slaves or whatever, fulcrums and whatever. But we don't know.
Yeah.
And they're pretty precise, almost like they were put together by calculators or computers.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing too, to piggyback off of your conspiracy theory, in the Middle East, in places like Syria, in Iran, what's Iran now? They were masters of astronomy and mathematics and science. They did incredible things back there. The first written word was in, I think, Sumatra on the clay tablets. This was where civilization began, and they did amazing things. It was almost like a renaissance before we had a renaissance. So, I've read so many theories about how they built the pyramids, and I'm just confused. I have no idea. But it's a pretty interesting thing.
Yeah. Well, is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to discuss about the book?
No, I wish I would have talked a little bit more about the book instead of everything else, but this was nice, and I would just hope that for your listeners there, who might be feeling any kind of fear or anxiety about the way things are going on, just find your center, surround yourself with people that have your back, and just get in a good place, and maybe turn off the TV if you need to do that. But there's, I think, a lot of, we're being kept in fear by political parties, by religious groups, and by society. And we need to be our own person, find our own voice, and just stand firm, with character and conviction, but not with fear. So fear doesn't have to be a part of the equation. And if anything, I would just hope that your listeners would go and consider that. That's probably the most important message of Paranormal Apocalypse. Don't be afraid. You don't have to be.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely a good message. And I do think that, from front to back of that book, it's definitely conveyed very well and very well written. And again, I definitely encourage the listeners to go get it. This is what it looks like.
That's scary. That's a scary cover. Look at that, God. And that's an alien. That's a gray dressed as a Grim Reaper. You knew that, right?
I did, yes. Fallon did not, but I did.
It took me a minute.
Yeah.
I was like, holy crap.
Yeah, that was my idea. And then they had their graphic illustrator do that. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Good. It came out great.
Yeah.
I might get that tattooed later.
Okay. Yeah, you may. Yeah.
But yeah, we definitely appreciate you being on the show. We definitely always a joy to interview you again. Sorry, we kind of ran off a little bit in some other directions.
Yeah, and that's fine. Yeah. So if anybody's interested in checking me out or contacting me for autographed copies of my books, my website is www.maximfurek.com. And there's a way to contact me. And also, I'd like to say that if you purchase any of my books, please be so kind as to leave a review on Amazon. It's probably the best thing you can do for us authors. So I'd really appreciate that, for that consideration. So
for sure.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Casey. Thanks, Fallon.
Thanks.
And continued success with Render the Darkness.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay. Take care now.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.